7 years in prison couldn't prepare John for the battle he's about to face. With a dying child depending on him, John is forced to fight for more than money in underground fight clubs. The movie begins with John Brickner being released from prison on parole. He was sentenced to 7 years for killing a man, but was released after serving 4 years due to his good behavior. He moves to Seattle and finds a job as a construction worker. One evening, John visits a bar, where he sees the waitress, Frankie, being harassed by 2 drunk men. He steps in, forces the man to apologize, and throws him out of the bar. His action impresses the bar owner, who offers John a second job as a bouncer. One day at the construction site, John is approached by Veronica, the widow of the man he killed. Veronica tells him she petitioned for his parole, not out of forgiveness, but because her 8-year-old daughter, Sarah, needs a $250,000 heart transplant. Veronica demands that he take responsibility by paying for the surgery. Later, Frankie tries to cheer him up at the bar, but John's mind is elsewhere. Frankie takes John to Reno, who manages fighters in an illegal underground fighting ring. When John sees what the job involves, he initially refuses, despite Reno and Frankie trying to convince him with the promise of high earnings.
6.
The next day at the construction site, John's boss fires him for no good reason, simply because he is an ex-convict. Ironically, the boss suffers a heart attack, and John saves his life until paramedics arrive. That evening, John visits Veronica to tell her he cannot pay for Sarah's surgery. She angrily reminds him of the promises he made in his letters. As their argument intensifies, Sarah comes out of her room to see what's happening and introduces her doll to John. This simple, sweet interaction touches John's heart, and he promises Veronica he'll try his best to help. John then reconsiders Reno's offer and visits the fighting ring. He reluctantly steps in for a fighter who passes out and manages to win the match despite taking a few hits. Afterward, John generously splits his winnings with the fighter who passed out. The next day, they approach a man named Nestor, to whom Reno owes money. Nestor, tired of Reno's excuses, orders his men to kill him. John steps in and strikes a deal, a fight between John and one of Nestor's fighters, with the loser paying $10,000. The fight is intense and surrounded by guard dogs that bite if the fighters get too close. John wins the match, securing enough money to pay Reno's debts. On the way home, John receives a call from Veronica, and upon reaching the hospital, he learns that Sarah's condition has worsened and she has been admitted after collapsing. John reassures her that he is working to gather the money for Sarah's surgery. Meanwhile, Frankie becomes increasingly critical of Reno's reckless decisions and accuses him of being irresponsible, mentioning a man named Veltz, someone Reno owes a large debt to. She feels a growing attachment to John and expresses her frustration, insisting that John is not just a cash machine for their problems. On the other hand, John focuses on participating in more fights, quickly gaining a reputation for his strength and skill. He wins every match he enters, further impressing Reno and Frankie. One night, while playing cards, Reno is cornered and beaten by Veltz's men. They issue a harsh ultimatum. Reno must pay the $150,000 he owes within a week, or they will harm Frankie. Shaken by the threat, Reno arranges another fight for John against one of Nestor's men. The fight is brutal, with John taking heavy blows. Frankie becomes increasingly anxious and pleads for the fight to stop, but Reno encourages John to unleash his rage. John ultimately delivers a powerful final blow, securing another victory. However, as they celebrate, John questions Reno about the fight's financial outcome, pointing out that it should have been worth 6 figures. Reno evades the question, saying they'll need to wait longer for bigger payouts. Later that night, John receives an incoherent call from Veronica. Alarmed, he rushes to her apartment and finds a heartbreaking letter informing her that an organ donor had declined Sarah's transplant request. In despair, Veronica has slit her wrists in the bathroom. John quickly saves her and takes her to the hospital. While waiting for updates on Veronica's condition, Frankie talks to John, and he finally opens up about his connection to Veronica and her daughter. During their conversation, Frankie reveals scars on her wrists, hinting that she had attempted suicide in the past.
She owes her life to Reno for saving her, but remains conflicted about his actions. When John visits Veronica, she confesses her feelings of hopelessness and admits she considered giving her own heart to Sarah. John reminds her that giving up is not the solution and promises to keep fighting to gather the money for Sarah's surgery. Life carries on, but John continues to face challenges. One day, while eating at a diner, he notices a car parked outside that seems to be watching him. Eventually, the car picks him up and takes him to meet a wealthy older man. This man turns out to be Veltz, the very person Reno owes money to. Surprisingly, Veltz explains that he feels indebted to John for saving the life of his son-in-law, the construction site boss who had a heart attack. John seizes the opportunity to explain Sarah's dire situation and his need for money to fund her heart transplant. Veltz offers John a difficult choice. He can either clear Reno's debt or secure funding for Sarah's surgery. John chooses to clear Reno's debt, despite the sacrifice it entails. Later, John visits Veronica to take her home from the hospital. During their conversation, Veronica opens up about her life. She admits that her daughter, Sarah, is her greatest achievement, even though having her meant giving up her dreams. She also reveals that she knows John didn't intentionally kill her husband, and it was an act of self-defense. Back at home, John begins packing his belongings, preparing to leave. Reno arrives, thanking John for clearing his debt. While they're talking, Reno gets a call. An anonymous benefactor has paid for John's next big fight, a highly anticipated match against a formidable opponent named Timmons. Excited by the opportunity, Reno, Frankie, and John prepare for the fight. The match turns out to be the most grueling one yet. During the fight, the cage floor collapses, and John falls into the basement, leaving everyone to assume he's dead. However, John dramatically rises from the rubble, covered in debris, and insists on continuing the fight. With determination and strength, he defeats Timmons, securing the win. After the fight, John uses his earnings to secure a heart donor for Sarah's transplant. The group shares a heartfelt hug, signifying the resolution of their struggles.